Morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. We have a very special live stream this morning with our head of our Africa office, Clifford Martin. So welcome, Clifford.
Thank you. Good day to everybody, wherever you may be.
So as always, we love to make our live streams interactive, so please feel free to pop into the chat with any questions. We are streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn today, so we will be able to see any questions that you might have for Clifford or myself. So feel free to pop that in the chat wherever you're joining. To start, we'd love to know where you're joining from. So if you could share your location, that would be excellent. So we know kind of what global audience we have today within our marketplace. So we're going to have a very great conversation today with Clifford about program assurance in emerging markets. And so, Clifford, we'd love to hear just a little bit about your background. You're newer to the Third Stage team in our newest office in Africa. So can you just give us, as I always say, your resume in 60 seconds?
Sure. Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Carla. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Very quickly, 60 seconds. My background is as a CIO of a major corporate organization. And I left that role probably about 12, 13 years ago. Since then, I've spent a lot of time in the ERP and digital transformation industry, working for organizations such as KPMG, Ernst & Young, Gartner, and very much focusing on digital transformation and assisting clients on that journey and helping them achieve success with their respective programs. So that's very briefly. And then in the last 5 seconds, as of the last 3 or 4 months, as you stated earlier, Carla, we've established Third Stage Africa, and it's been an exciting journey so far. So there we go.
Excellent. And can you tell us just a little bit about the client portfolio that you work with? What are some of the industries? What are some of the services that you do before we jump into program assurance specifically?
Sure. Yes. So it's been a fascinating and exciting journey so far because, being responsible for the Africa region, the diversity that we have, and the demographics and just the scale of the continent. So we have engagements and clients in a number of different regions across Africa, and in various industries from manufacturing, distribution, retail. And interestingly enough, I always find it to be extremely interesting that the challenges that they're facing are very often similar. Mm-hmm. And I do think, and I'm sure we're going to unpack this a little bit more, I do think that within emerging markets, organizations often do not have the capabilities to be able to be successful, and hence the dependence on organizations such as ourselves and on roles and capabilities such as independent program assurance. So I like to say that as Third Stage, in terms of a digital transformation journey, we get involved across the life cycle. So what I like to call from business case to business benefits. And we get involved in almost anything except the actual implementation, but through a very objective lens and independent lens, and working at an executive level and kind of positioning ourselves as a trusted advisor. So that's really what we bring to the market.
Absolutely. That technology agnostic and independent lens is so important, just because we go into an engagement as a business advisor, and a lot of times it's because we want to make sure that the business is successful and that the technology brings value, not so much that the technology is a certain system. We don't have any partnerships like that. We do work closely with our industry partners, whether it is a system integrator or a vendor, but not so much in the financial joining sense. So in that kind of conversation, Clifford, can you explain to us what program assurance is?
Sure. So thank you for that question, Carla. And I really see it as a tool and a capability in the hands of the client executive. And I think there are a couple of key characteristics in terms of that role. The independence is extremely important. And as you correctly stated, being technology agnostic is extremely important. and positioning such a role at an executive level and working with this executive. And I think importantly, not just for the implementation or not just coming on board once a technology has been selected or once and systems integrator has been appointed, but actually working with the organization right in the beginning, whether that's a feasibility study, whether that's developing the business case, whether it's providing an independent view or independent facilitation of different vendor solution propositions or demonstrations, or even contract negotiation, but being involved right at the outset. Because in this type of role, it then helps one to shape and set the priorities and ensure that the necessary quality metrics and standard are incorporated in, for example, the contracts with an SI, with the solution provider. So I really see it as having a couple of key characteristics. Independence, absolutely essential. Having the depth of skill and technical knowledge across the board, as you again correctly state, not just technology, the old adage of people, process, technology, and being able to draw on that and deploy it in the right areas is extremely important. And working hand in hand with the executive to achieve success is really what that role entails.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to talk about the program insurance piece of that to ensure just overall that independent lens. What we come in and do, as Clifford stated, is we are an advocate and a partner for the business and moving through all of these different vendor relationships. So Clifford, as a veteran in the digital transformation field, can you explain to us kind of, can a technology software vendor achieve that same program assurance, or why is it important to have that independence lens when going into these kind of dynamics within a digital transformation project?
Sure. Well, they'll certainly often claim that they can, but I'm a little bit skeptical. So certainly within the industry, Carla, there are various, let's call them assurance providers that would claim to be able to fulfill a similar role. And that might well be from the systems integrator perspective, some of the big consulting houses. I think that has its limitations, obviously independence and objectivity possibly being one. And not forgetting, because we often kind of forget as well that a systems integrator, if one takes a full digital transformation lifecycle journey, a typical journey, the systems integrator is only really involved in the implementation side and also not fully involved, not responsible for all aspects of the implementation. So their role in that journey in itself is inherently limited. I think often clients would use the auditing houses, some of the big auditing firms to fulfill this role. And I think there's some benefit in that, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. And often they'll rely on the software vendor, but generally their role is going to be very much technically focused. So only really touching on one of those three critical components if we talk about people, process, and technology, all having to be ready at the right time to ensure success at the end of the day. And of course, those organizations those software providers will generally also only focus on or come in at certain specific points in the journey and do some type of assessment as to the technical configuration or the technology stack or whatever the case may be. So generally they have a very limited role, and there is often a question mark around the objectivity of such assurance providers.
Right, that professional skepticism, which is your word, which I have now coined as my own term and like to use it in every sort of content production that we have here. So definitely, an important thing to just understand those roles. It doesn't mean that that's not an important partner. It's just important
Absolutely.
to understand, what that looks like as far as just overall project roles. So speaking of project structure, where does the program assurance fit within an overall ERP project, CRM project, any sort of technology implementation?
Great question. And I think, if one's going to, it needs to have the authority, of course, to be able to fulfill its role and its terms of reference. So it's extremely important that it's positioned at the right level within the overall program structure. And I often find that it works best, and certainly from third stage, we advocate that we are part of the steering committee of that project. And there may be kind of a solid line reporting relationship to the program director, preferably the steering committee, but certainly some type of dotted line, if you want, or relationship with the program sponsor at an executive level. So it's extremely important that it's not that it's connected with and part of the overall structure and very much part of the team, but that it's not subject to the authority of a particular SI or even of the client program management structure, and it has the independence to be able to go outside that structure and kind of, raise the alarm if need be.
Right, that's very interesting, and such an important role to be able to mitigate any risks within the project and talk about if there's any red flags as well. So I want to just take a minute to acknowledge your South African peers here in the African market that are joining us. We have Peter and Debbie here that are actually from Cape Town, in Western Cape Town, same as Clifford, who's in the Cape Town area in South Africa. So please feel free to pop any Africa specific or program assurance specific questions in the chat while we have Clifford with us today. So moving back to that overall project structure, Clifford, I'm wondering if you can take us through the overall program assurance type of strategy. So when we're talking about things like risk mitigation or making sure that when you are looking through all of your deliverables, that program assurance is making sure that we're providing quality, or any sort of independent consultant is providing quality. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Carlos, so what I always advise clients is, one wants some type of quality management framework to be in place. And of course, the client management has to retain accountability for the program
Sure.
and ensure that there is some type of quality management framework in place. And there are various different stakeholder groups that would contribute to that. Certainly, it's a very legitimate question, valid question to ask of a systems integrator. These are the deliverables you're responsible for. Talk to me about the type of approach and process you will put in place to ensure the quality of such deliverables. And delving further down, then one also wants to ensure that that those standards and quality metrics and the quality approach is incorporated in those agreements, because that then provides a basis for further assessment and evaluation throughout the journey. So extremely important that this type of program assurance role is independent of the SI and the solution provider particularly, and is involved right up front, so that we can get the foundation in place, we can get the mechanics of how that quality management process is going to work. And typically what we like to propose is that there's some stage gate process in place or approach. And what I mean by that is, if there's always going to be some type of implementation methodology being used. Let's use SAP as a very popular solution within this particular region. So they would have the Activate methodology. There would be certain phases within that methodology as we go through deploy or rather through design, realization, deploy, post-go-live support, sustainability, etc. And there will be specific deliverables within each of those phases as incorporated in the methodology. And so what we like to design with the client's input and with the SI's input right up front, as well as the solution provider, is let's understand how we're going to manage quality throughout this program. Let's understand the respective roles. And very important, let's understand what are the predefined metrics that inform those deliverables that you as the SI, or you as the business, or you as the client's project management team are responsible for. What are those predefined metrics? And what are the criteria that we're going to utilize as an independent program assurance provider to assess whether those metrics have actually been met, whether that be testing or data migration or design or cut over deployment, whatever the case may be. So it's extremely important that that program is designed up front, that all the different stakeholder groups understand their roles and responsibilities within that, and that there's clarity and alignment around what the quality metrics are for the various deliverables within each of those phases. And once one has that in place, it's kind of half the battle won, because now there's alignment as opposed to what needs to be delivered, and there's independent assessment with the necessary authority to go in there and do that assessment and provide feedback to the steering committee and sponsors as to whether those criteria have been met or not, and indeed whether the program may now transition from one particular phase to the next. So fundamentally important role, but all the heavy lifting starts at the start of the program, and then it gets a lot easier. Trying to implement that
Right.
on the fly is extremely difficult.
Absolutely. And so, why is that important specifically, Clifford, in these emerging markets, such as a lot of the Africa work that you do? Why is that program assurance so important specifically for those clients?
Yes, I think it's such an important point you raise, Carla, because we often do find that corporates and organisation within our region do not necessarily have the maturity of skills, capabilities within their organisation to successfully navigate these journeys. And let me give you a typical example. As you could well imagine, many of these tier one ERP vendors and SIs, they are very skilled and highly trained, highly experienced negotiating teams. The
Right.
procurement department of a corporate may only engage with an SI around an ERP once or twice in their career. So it's a mismatch from the start. And then ensuring that one is able to, and I use the kind of term, keep everybody honest and ensure that they do what they need to do becomes an extremely important role for organizations that don't necessarily have those capabilities. And I think let me also add, and I see there are a few South Africans that have dialed in and they'd be well aware of this. We've had some spectacular corporate failures with some of the big global names in the ERP space, colluding with specifically state-owned organizations, state-owned entities, and so there's been some spectacular failures within this particular region, and I absolutely believe that having a mature and competent, independent assurance provider on board. And let me also add the cost of such an assurance provider is negligible in
Right.
comparison to the cost of these programs. So to me, and perhaps I'm a little bit biased, but it's a good investment, I think, from a client's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that in a variety of areas within digital transformation. For example, our partner from Taft Law talks a lot about Marcus Harris, who is one of our sponsors of our digital stratosphere and is often a guest here, talks about just the expense of the overall issues within contracting if you don't invest in, that actual expertise up front. It can be much more expensive in the long run. So I want to show a comment here from Debbie on LinkedIn that is kind of interesting that I'd love your reaction to. So what she said is, what we have found with our assurance partners is they do not advise as they would be marking their own homework, so to speak. So what's your reaction to that, Clifford, and being a main stakeholder in this market and understanding what assurance partners should be doing and what they may not be doing a lot of times for clients?
Yes. I wonder if Debbie doesn't mean implement systems integrators, which I'm assuming she means systems integrators when she talks about partners there. And they often do mark their own homework, and of course don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. So how that works practically is that with a systems integrator, there's often a senior partner that's designated the role of QA, and but yeah, and maybe perhaps a little bit of that professional skepticism coming through over here. I think that there's often some type of business development tied to that role as well, from what I've in terms of my experience. But they cannot mark their own homework, and as you can imagine that it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult for an SI to be able to um, stop a program because they themselves are not achieving the necessary objectives. So that conflict of interest needs to be avoided at all costs. We do often, one also does have the case where, and some type of audit firms are both the auditors and the implementation partners, and there's a conflict of interest immediately as well. So I think one needs to ensure that one avoids those type of conflicts of interest.
And how do you manage to that conflict of interest if you are a client or the business owner that's going through this overall technology implementation or digital transformation? How do you remain in that professional skepticism fear that or sphere that you talk about, just to ensure that you still have project ownership?
Yeah, well, Carla, one of the challenges that we see is, these engagements are often, from a cost perspective, they're kind of front loaded. So
Hmm.
we have a situation where we only 30 or 40, 50% through the project, but 70, 80% of the budget's been expended. And as you can imagine, it's extremely difficult. And in my experience, sitting on a number of steering committees for digital transformation ERP projects, it becomes extremely difficult from a client perspective, because effectively what they need to be able to do is say, you know, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like we're quite there. The statistics and metrics that we're seeing coming out of the normal standard reporting shows that we're behind on development, or there's some key design decisions outside, but we're already going forward with testing. And that's often because the SIs, the payment, the billing is tied to certain milestones. So it becomes, and stopping, as I'm sure you would appreciate, stopping a program of this nature, with such a high burn rate, with a heavy investment in resources and tight deadlines from a client perspective, becomes extremely difficult. I do also find that between the software vendor and the SI, they often control the narrative on these projects, and they often play a leading role in terms of leading it and deciding and making key decisions, very often on behalf of the client. So having that independent program assurance, just in terms of your question, just provides either some comfort or some perspective and clarity, and allows the client to have better visibility into where things are actually, and very importantly, what the risks are going forward, and therefore allows the client to make more informed decisions, as opposed to, and that decision is not necessarily, stopping the project. It could be having a different deployment or go live approach. It could be resourcing up. It could be shifting emphasis. Whatever the case may be. But absolutely, I do believe that the role allows for better visibility and allows for better, more informed decision making on the part of the client. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's excellent advice with that visibility, and so important within that project ownership, and just remembering that you as the business leader, as that stakeholder, should definitely maintain that control, or that overall opinion of what is best for your business. So I wonder, Clifford, if I could ask you about program assurance specifically in Africa, in the lens of how do you make sure that when you invest in an independent or agnostic partner within the Africa region, that it is a legitimate partner. It's a little bit different than a lot of our other regions, in just the fact that overall trust needs to be a strong foundation for our Africa marketplace. So I wonder if you could give us some tips on how to make sure that you're selecting the right partner in program assurance.
Yes. Uh, Great question. Carla, so I do think that it needs to happen upfront. So when an organization is thinking about embarking on a digital transformation program, or upgrading or re-implementing, or whatever the case may be, of course, we operate in an industry where everything tends to default to the technology. So the
Right.
first going to, we like SAP, or we like Info, or whatever the case may be, and that's truly where it starts. I think that's wrong. It needs to. I think the first thing is that it needs to start with, who is our trusted advisor. Who in the marketplace is truly independent, is truly technology agnostic, and has the breadth and depth of skills, and the appreciation across the market as to who the key players are, both in terms of solution providers, as well as systems integrators, and whatever other specialist vendors you may bring on board. So I think the timing is important, firstly, and how we deploy that role becomes important, because certainly, the auditing firms, and I've worked for some of them, have fantastic skills and great depth and focus, but they do tend to focus at a transactional level. So
Mhm.
a lot of the work that's done is around design and controls and business processes and data integrity, and those are all important things. But I think the the true program assurance role operates at a strategic level. It ensures that the organization achieves the end goals, and deployment and go live is, of course, not the final goal. Driving business benefits is the final goal, those activities and objectives extend way beyond the role of an SI. So being on board for the full journey and being on board at an executive level and having the depth and experience to be able to fulfill that role at an executive level as a trusted advisor is extremely important. So both timing, I think how it's positioned, being totally agnostic in the marketplace, and being able to bring the focus at the correct level in the organization, and build those relationships with the executive is extremely important in selecting such a partner.
Yeah, and we always do our house analogy here at Third Stage. A lot of times is the audit firms are really easy to work with a lot of times because you have that existing relationship, and it's always nice to be able to work with someone who's been integrated in your business before. But a lot of times we compare it to when you build a house, the contractor, of course, knows about your house, but the electrician is going to go in and provide all of your wiring, electricity, those types of things, because that's their expertise. And a lot of times that's what we find with our clients when they do get involved in a digital transformation or a technology implementation with those audit firms is they're a great resource, but that's not their overall expertise. And really investing in that partner that understands the nuances of a technology implementation can be a very, very positive investment. And then I'll share another comment we have here from LinkedIn is generally what we have found assurance partners really help the steering committee to manage risks and put mitigation strategies in place for better visibility. So very along the lines of what you're talking about, Clifford, is that additional just overall risk mitigation strategies, especially for our smaller or mid-sized businesses. That technology implementation is a huge risk because it's a vast expense, and that failure could lead to catastrophic results.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up here in the last couple minutes, because we only have Clifford for 30 minutes, you can always tell our shorter live streams because they're in high demand from our clients here. So if you were to give some advice specifically in the Africa market, Clifford, for digital transformation or going through any sort of program assurance, overall integration, what would be your advice?
Apply a high dosage of professional skepticism
Yes.
to your SI and to your solution provider, and ensure that you organize yourself accordingly. And by that I mean ensure that you have full visibility and take accountability for the decision making. And if you don't feel that you have the capabilities within your organization to do that, absolutely bring on a trusted advisor who can walk with you through this journey. It's worth its weight in gold, in my humble opinion.
Well, your humble opinion is certainly valued, and we appreciate all your insight. Thank you to our audience for this, great engagement. I'll have to say that, Eric better watch out because we got another influencer on our hand here in the Africa market when it comes to digital transformation. So Clifford, we can't wait to have you back on our live stream and our other content development strategies. So if you do have questions for Clifford, we will pop his email address in the chat here, and you're able to access him via email. If you're interested in joining our team here at Third Stage Africa, please email work@thirdstage-consulting.com. And if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to us via YouTube or LinkedIn by subscribing to our channel. So thanks again, Clifford, for all of this excellent advice. We so appreciate your time. And everyone, thank you so much for joining today. We do have live streams every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Eric does Tuesdays, I do Thursdays. And we're very, very grateful for your time today, Clifford. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carla, and thank you to those who have joined for the questions. Have a good afternoon.
Yes, absolutely. So have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, and we will see you next week.